Can everyone hear me okay? Yes. Awesome, great. Well, my name is Murry, and I'm so glad that you all came out tonight to listen. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about light pollution, some of its consequences for both humans and birds, and also at the end a little bit about what we can do to solve the problems. So I wanted to start by letting you know a little bit about who I am. I grew up always loving animals and wanting to do something with animals as a professional career. So I started in Mississippi State University, not really knowing exactly what I wanted to do with animals, but just trying out different things. I thought I might want to do research in carnivore ecology, so I did some research on coyotes and rabbits and their relationships. And I set a lot of trail cameras, but it wasn't until I took an ornithology class that I absolutely fell in love with birds and knew that that was what I wanted to research for my career. So after I graduated Mississippi State is when I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina to go to school at NC State. And now I study light pollution and urban ecology, especially with birds. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And in this presentation, I'm just going to take you again through what is light pollution, the health consequences, the effect on birds, let you know a little bit about my research, and I have some results which I'm excited about, and also, of course, what we can do about light pollution. So first of all, what is light pollution? As I'm sure you all know, light pollution is a big source of artificial light, also called artificial light at night. It mostly comes from street lights around the world, but also from buildings, billboards, any big light source that you can think of, especially in cities. And what that does is it contributes to carbon emissions through the heat that the light bulbs give off, and it also obscures the natural lights of the night sky. And it continues to increase each year because urbanization continues to increase. And as more and more people build developments and build new cities, then light pollution will continue to spread. And there are different types of light pollution. The main type that you might be familiar with is over illumination, and that is when the lights are really, really intense, seemingly sometimes for no reason, it doesn't need to be this much light in this area, but you have a headlight just on you at all times. So that is over illumination, and because the lights are so bright, that could lead to light trespass and glare, which is when light from the light source is still leaking over, way past where the original light source is supposed to be. And with all of that lights, over illumination, and glare and trespass, all of that light reflects off of surfaces and becomes sky glow. And sky glow is the biggest issue because that is creates a sheet over everything so that you can't see the stars past it. And so what kind of light pollution are we talking about? Because there's a lot of different types of light. So I always get the question, is there a good type of artificial light? And the answer is both yes and no. So first of all artificial lights are somewhat harmful, but some are more harmful than others. And the most harmful one is blue light, which is the blue glow that you see mostly in electronics, TV screens, your cell phones. But if you do red or yellow, warm colored lights, those are better than blue lights or white lights. And also lights that are over 3,000 kelvins, which is just the intensity of the light. For example, you'll probably see it marketed as warm light or cool light. And the warm light is usually the safer option. So what does all of this matter? So first of all, for humans, artificial light at night interrupts our circadian rhythm. And our circadian rhythm is just our internal clock. And our internal clock follows the patterns of the sun and the stars and the natural daylight that comes and helps to really regulate our systems and get our biological clock all synced up. But you may be thinking like, well, I've got a cell phone, I know what time it is, why do I need a circadian rhythm? Well, because it doesn't just interrupt your natural circadian rhythm. Because of that, it also will relate to poor quality of sleep, especially if you have lights close to your face while you're trying to sleep. It also leads to increased stress and anxiety. And over long periods of time, artificial light can damage your retina and also increase your risk for certain diseases like types of cancers and like diabetes and heart issues. So it really is a serious problem for a lot of people, especially if you live like deep in a city. Like imagine living in New York, the city that never sleeps and there's lights everywhere all the time. So quick poll. Raise your hand if you have ever seen a night sky that looks kind of like this. Okay, keep your hand raised if you can see this where you live right now. Okay, well, that kind of makes sense because over 80% of North Americans where they live cannot see the Milky Way. They can't step outside of their homes and look up and see any stars. And that's really disappointing because that's a beautiful sight, isn't it? And if you look at this map, the kind of like redder areas are where the artificial light is most concentrated. And so keep those most concentrated areas in mind and compare it to these maps. On the right are just different maps of all of North America's indigenous species, which means that like species that can only be found here in North America. And again, the redder areas are where the most species are found. And if you compare on the right to the light pollution map on the left, you might notice that there's a lot of overlap between where most of our species are and where the most light pollution is. And so we talked about the consequences for human health, potential increase of stress and anxiety, diseases. So what about all these wildlife species? Well, it's the exact same thing for them, unfortunately. They also experience more stress as light pollution invades into their territories. They also experience like retina damage or interrupted light senses, interrupted navigational senses if they rely on light. There are even, I just recently learned, coral species in the ocean that spawn to moonlight. And if they can't like see the moonlight because of the light pollution, their timing might be off. And so let me back up for a second. Actually, no, I'm gonna go back. Okay, so this leads me to more of my research. I focus on how do sensory pollutants impact birds. And a sensory pollutant is just any type of pollutant that either what makes it so that animals can't sense a signal or it misdirects the animal so that they're following a signal that isn't the one they're supposed to be following. So sensory pollutants, light pollution is one, noise pollution is another, and there are other subcategories depending on the species. So let's talk about how light pollution impacts adult birds. First of all, is going to really impact their migration. A lot of birds rely on the stars and migrate at night to like navigate and see where they're going and reach their destination. But if there's like a big city light over here and they can't really see the stars, they might veer over to the big light where they're not supposed to go, and then they've changed their migration patterns. They may not be landing in a spot where there's enough food sources or nesting material, not enough mates. Or in the worst case scenarios, they might collide into a building. In fact, there are, I think, 1 billion building collisions every year because of artificial lights. And also, artificial light has been shown to cause birds to mate a little bit earlier, which could be partially good, partially bad, which I'll get into a little bit why it could be good later. But the concern is that because they are mating and having chicks early, that might not sync with their food source. the food source might still not be there yet, but they've already had chicks that they need to feed. So that's adult birds, but what about chicks? These are barn swallow chicks. This is my study species. They are super, super tiny, and I think they're cute. Some people think they look like little aliens, but I'll leave it up to you to decide. But chicks also experience poor sleep caused by light pollution, which leads to a stress response. And it affects the way that they develop their metabolic systems and their bodies. So let's dive into why that would be. So this is under normal circumstances. A chick gets fed, the food that it eats naturally increases its blood sugar levels as they're supposed to. And when the chick goes to sleep under natural conditions, all of that extra glucose that it has in its system turns into like proteins. And proteins are super, super important for birds. So it builds their muscles and their feathers and their wings and gives them the power to grow up and fly away. And then because that glucose has turned into protein, there's not a whole lot of high blood sugar in the bloodstream. And so they're like regulated and everything's normal and the cycle repeats itself the next day. But let's throw light pollution into the mix. So first the chick gets fed and its bloodstream, blood glucose levels naturally rise. But then the chick can't really sleep at night a whole lot. It's a little bit stressed and it's not able to move as many nutrients into proteins, which are necessary for them to grow up. So if the body isn't producing as many proteins, what happens to the blood sugar? Well, it just stays in the bloodstream. And high blood sugar, just like it would be in us, can potentially lead to metabolic diseases in birds. So I designed a light pollution experiment that I've been carrying out for the past 3 years, past 3 summers. And I'm trying to test and see how chicks grow in light pollution compared to natural conditions. So what I initially thought was going to happen was that chicks in light pollution will grow slower and have slower development, and that they'll be so stressed out that they'll have a very high glucose level. So in order to test this, I work at a barn in Lyndhurst Snow Camp, North Carolina. It's a very small town. I'm not surprised, small and rural, so that the only artificial lights that are there are the ones that I put up in my barn. And it has about 50 nests inside of it. And over each nest, I put a little light above the nest. This is me in the dark, making sure my lighting setup works. And so some of the nests experience artificial light all night long, while others are left in natural conditions. And as the chicks grow up, I start to measure them. And I take all sorts of measurements. I see how many eggs are being laid in the nest. I see how long it takes the eggs to hatch, how many eggs actually hatch. And then as the chicks grow, I start doing multiple body measurements. Like here, I put the bird in a little cup and I take its mass. I use rulers to figure out how long their feathers are, how long their heads are getting, how long their wings are getting. It's like I'm running a little bird doctor's office out at the barn. And I also take blood samples and do standardized photos like this one here, and you'll see a couple of others, just to have multiple measures of how they grow over time. And here's some of the standardized photos. These are like newborns. You can still see some of their feathers are still wet. If you notice any color, like on their toes, that has nail polish. I put nail polish on their little toes to like just mark individuals because I'm tracking each individual chick's growth. And these are so small that they are about the size and weight of a grape. That's how little they are. But they grew up pretty fast. This chick, both of these are about 2 weeks old, maybe a little bit younger. And they already look like adults, don't they? And this is how I draw some of the blood. I think this one looks a little grumpy after having drawn the blood, but I make sure to take care of them and make sure they have stopped bleeding and are safe and sound, and then put them back in the nest. I have some of these blood samples frozen. They are awaiting further protein analysis that I have not done yet, but I have a year left in my program, so I need to do them soon. But yes, I'm hoping that will give me additional information to what is happening with them internally. This is just further illustrating that I do not raise these chicks. The mothers naturally raise them and feed them. That is not a picture of me when I'm hungry. It's actually the chicks. And I just climb up a ladder, take them out of the nest, bring them to my banding station, shoo my dog away constantly, and then take the measurements that I need and put them back in the nest. But the one thing that I actually do is keep predators away from my study species. I have been experiencing a lot of predation from rat snakes, and so that's been a battle. I believe there's some rat snakes in the back if you want to see what one looks like up close. But yes, I have to try to set humane traps and like trap them and release them in other areas, because I don't want, like the dog, I don't want the dog to eat my homework. I don't want the snake to eat my research. Another effect that has unfortunately been happening a little bit due to my light pollution experiments is this asymmetrical phenomenon, where you'll see one side of the bird isn't growing as fast as the other side. And based on what I found, this only happens in artificial settings. Like it's been noted in birds that are studied in laboratories, which leads me to believe that it's the artificial lights that causes it. It is also a behavioral issue with the parents. The mother didn't roll the egg around evenly enough during incubation, and so that led to an uneven growth rate. And in my study, I'm not measuring anything but the parents. That is something that I would really love to do, especially since I'm seeing results like this. So artificial light can also be affecting parental behavior and the way that they care for the chicks, which subsequently affects chicks and how they grow up.
Is that a permanent condition? Will it always be?
So it depends on how severe. This is the most severe case that I've seen, and I've only seen about like 6 cases total. This one got eaten by a rat snake, so I will never know how it fared, but the others have kind of caught up, or their wings have both developed to the point where they're functional and they have been able to fly away. So out of my results so far, this is what I have found. In the light pollution treatments, birds do unfortunately have higher blood sugar levels. However, a lot of their body proportions have remained the same. The only notable body measurement that is different between the 2 groups is how much they weigh. So the light pollution treatment actually weighs a lot less than the chicks in natural conditions. And then the chicks in natural conditions are also slower at leaving the nest, where chicks in the light pollution have grown their feathers really fast and have left the nest first. And so these are pretty much 2 chicks at the same age, and you can kind of see that visual difference of their development.
Do you know why?
I do know why. Well, I have an idea. I do.
You don't tell us later.
I will tell you. I will tell you right now, in fact. So what does that even mean? Well, just because they have higher blood glucose doesn't automatically mean they have like metabolic disease, like Avian diabetes, but it does mean that artificial light increases their risk for that. The second thing that it means is that we think that a lot of the proteins that the chicks are making in the light pollution go more towards feather growth rather than the body mass. Because remember, they grew feathers faster, but they were way lighter. So maybe they're putting all their resources in the feathers because they want to get away from the artificial light source as quickly as possible. I've even seen fledglings, like sometimes they'll like come out but return to their nest. they won't return to the nest that they grew up in. They'll return to a nest that does not have a light above it. And then another thing to further study is like, can they maintain their bodies? Is there any consequence to leaving the nest so early? I would love to be able to do a recapture study to see if those birds survive until the next year, or if they come back and they now weigh the same as the other chicks. So do they catch up? Does their blood metabolism ever regulate? These are further questions that I don't yet know the answer to, but would be really interesting for determining the long-term impacts of light pollution. But there might be a slight positive to faster fledging, and that is because barn swallows, they lay between 2 to 3 clutches every single year. And if your first group of kids are already up and out of the nest, you can move on to your next group of kids way faster. So maybe faster fledging leads to more broods. We just don't know the survival rate of those broods yet, which is why doing those future studies are even more important. But overall, if light pollution continues the way that it is, we are going to see a phenotypic or evolutionary shift in the way that birds are, especially with their size and with the way their metabolisms work. But there are some solutions. This is not all doom and gloom. So these are the general solutions: either turn off the lights, establish protected dark zones, or change the lights. And I'm going to dive into each one of these. So I love this headline: during an LA blackout, residents called 911. But imagine that, never having seen the Milky Way, and then what's that? Yes, but turning off the lights is a simple solution that like pretty much everybody has the power to do. All you have to do is flip a switch, and that will help so much. Not only for your circadian rhythm and health, but it saves you money with your light bill and electricity, and it's just better for your sleep and better for the wildlife surrounding you. Protected dark zones are basically just turning off the lights on a larger scale. This will require some policies or some organizations to get involved to say, hey, for this area between this time and this time, all lights are going to be off. And that will allow a lot of that sky glow to reduce, because sky glow is like the light reflecting off of different surfaces, and sky glow can also interfere with like rural areas or like heavily forested areas. Even if the light isn't in there, the light is so strong that it will trespass over into those areas. So protected dark sky programs will be the way to protect a large portion of land and wildlife. And also has benefits of stargazing if people won't call the police the next time they see stars. And the last solution, if we can't turn off the lights, we can at least change the lights. So like I mentioned earlier, warmer colored lights like reds and yellows are better than other colors. LED lights instead of regular incandescent bulbs are more sustainable and more eco-friendly. They don't emit as much carbons or require as much electricity and power. And finally, we have to note how we place the lights and how we enclose the lights. If you see the graph up above, if there's no cover on the light just spreads everywhere. But the best solution is to angle the lights downwards so that only the small area that you want illuminated stays lit. Also, motion sensor lights is really great for this as well. Motion sensors only on when you need them to be on. And I've seen that these are good solutions for people, especially who are worried about crime. If you turn off, they assume that if you turn off the lights, then crime will increase. But actually, a lot of studies have found just the opposite. If you turn off the lights, crime reduces. And that is because when everything is so brightly illuminated, your eyes lose the ability to like adjust their focus. Whereas if you just have like small lights in certain areas or no lights at all, you can more easily perceive shadows and like changes and things moving. And so you're more aware and more alert of your surroundings. So crime goes down. The International Dark Sky Association is a great resource if you want to implement any of these changes. If you scan the QR code, it will take you straight to their website. And the IDA is a great resource for education materials, lighting. It'll give you links to like, this is a great light source, or this is a type of light that you can use in your home versus your office in different areas. And it is also great for like checking up on information and the latest research surrounding artificial light at night. And for the birds, I have to highlight World Migratory Bird Day. The first one this year for spring migration was in May, but the one for fall is coming up on October 8th. And World Migratory Bird Day is the day where everyone should turn off all of their lights. Because we all know that all birds migrate on one single day, once in the night. But no, to bring more awareness to the issue of light pollution and try to spread the message to change the lights or turn off the lights to help migrating birds. And so if you heard nothing that I said, this is the slide to pay attention to. Okay, everybody's looking great. So just know that light pollution comes from all artificial light sources. There's not really one that's okay or acceptable. They all cause the same damage. Light pollution has negative health consequences for both humans and wildlife. But there is something that we can do about it, which is reduce the amount of light pollution. It'll be beneficial for both us and for wildlife, and everybody will be happier under the stars. And with that, this is my contact information. Feel free to ask me questions, email me at any time, but I will also take questions right now. Thank you for listening. Always here on Patterson in the back. I'm not sure if they know why the different wavelengths have a different effect, just that they do. So that's the area of research for me. Yes.
Does the mom bird mind you taking the baby up every day and putting it back?
Thankfully, no. These birds, they don't seem to mind. They just kind of like fly away when I come, and I make sure to give them breaks and let them come back. I also never take like the whole nest at the same time, so that when she comes back, she doesn't freak out that her nest is empty. But yeah, I haven't gotten bombed or like pooped like that.
Are there any laws concerning light pollution in North Carolina?
I believe there are some new laws starting to come in place with like the types of lights that are being put out. I'm not sure if any are for like implementing like a curfew, like all lights have to be off at this time. But some areas are starting to put in more sustainable lighting options, or at least less lights. But a lot of the lights are still so intense, like it's like a headlight flaring at you, even if it's just one light.
Well, a couple of years ago, Atlanta did, I don't know whom all was involved, enforce cutting off lights around, I mean, the big towers, like at 11 o'clock at night. Is there a better time that, I mean, I'm sure that was business reasons, but.
Right. I mean, the best time for wildlife follows the natural sunrise and sunset times, but I don't think people will follow those quite well, but any period of light off is good. Yes.
Well, I'm aware that the activists used the International Migratory Bird Act to make changes to the way they put up electrical wires across the countryside, so that hawks and eagles and big birds like that don't get electrocuted because they were killing birds. So if night lights, if all these lights are killing birds, isn't there a way to use the Migratory Bird Act to enforce or to create legislation? Have you looked into that or thought about it?
Yes, and that's really, that's the best case scenario hope It's just that a lot of politicians don't listen and like want to do the bare minimum, so. Yes, that is a great idea that needs to happen. Yes.
Well, too, I don't think most people realize that there's a whole line in business of low voltage LED lights,
Right.
which I have installed a lot of over the years. And they're so much better looking, and they can be put on timers, so they cut off pretty early and all. But the LED low voltage, which is only a 12-volt system, is so much better than the 110 floodlights and that kind of thing that you see outside the building. And yet it affords you the same protection because you have the shadows. If people are gonna break in and that kind of.
Right, exactly, and that's really what my research and a lot of other researchers are pushing for to happen on more of a broader scale. That seems to be the best solution that we can get everybody to agree on, that doesn't also harm the birds.
Well, Murray, thank you so much. She's gonna stick around.
Yeah, I'll be
for our
around.
session. We're all gonna go home and turn off all the lights. And give it all time to sure.
I know you said that some of these lectures are online.
Yeah.
Are they on YouTube or do you go to
But
the
it
website and click from the website or?
So the ones that we're permitted to, we upload to our YouTube channel. And you can find that all on the HBS website.
Is that not, is it been uploaded?
Did we get permission from Murray? Winter says yes. Winter, y'all have a fun for winter. She's the reason things can be virtual. This little bird, this is called a meeting owl. He turned his head to pick up who's speaking. And it has changed the game on simultaneous in-person virtual. So that's my bird. The meeting owl. All right, we'll see y'all outside. Thank you.